The diner sat at the edge of town like an old secret nobody wanted to admit they knew. Its neon sign flickered with a tired buzz, casting a sickly pink glow over the parking lot. Inside, the air smelled of grease and stale coffee, and the sound of plates clinking and silverware scraping against ceramic filled the room like a constant, boring heartbeat. It was late, just after midnight. Most people were either asleep or stumbling home from the bar. But the diner never truly closed. It was the kind of place where the lonely came to hide, where the lost came to drink, and where the tired came to rest their heads for just a few minutes longer. The girl sat alone at the counter. She didn't look like she belonged there. Not because she was dressed wrong or looked out of place, she wasn't. She wore a simple shirt and jeans, hair tied back in a practical knot. She looked like someone who didn't want attention. Like someone who didn't need it. But there was something about her that made people look away. Maybe it was the way she held herself, straight-backed, unafraid. Maybe it was the way her eyes kept scanning the room, not in fear, but in calculation. Or maybe it was the quiet strength that radiated from her like heat. She sipped her coffee slowly, her fingers wrapped around the cup as if it was the only thing keeping her grounded. She had a book open, but she wasn't reading. She was watching. The door opened with a loud bell, and a group of men entered. They were loud before they even sat down, laughing, shouting, slapping each other on the back. They were the kind of men who believed the world belonged to them. Leather jackets, cheap cologne, dirty boots, eyes that looked like they'd seen too much and didn't care. They slid into a booth near the window, their voices growing louder as they ordered beers. The waitress didn't even look at them. She knew them. Everyone did. The girl kept her gaze forward, but she noticed them. Everyone noticed them. It wasn't possible not to. One of the men caught sight of her. He smirked, nudging his friend like a kid who'd spotted a target. "Hey," he said, loud enough for the whole diner to hear. "Look at her. She's all alone." His friends laughed. One of them whistled. The girl didn't move. She didn't look at them. She didn't even flinch. The man stood and walked toward her like he owned the place. He didn't bother to hide his grin. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, leaning against the counter. "You lost or something?" The girl finally looked up. Her eyes were calm, not scared, not angry, calm. "Leave me alone," she said quietly. The man laughed. "Ah, come on, don't be like that, we're just having fun." He reached out, grabbing her arm. She pulled away. He grabbed again, harder. She stood up, her chair scraping the floor. Her body was tense, ready to move, ready to strike, ready to run. "Let go," she said, her voice steady. The man's grin widened. "Or what?" he asked. He yanked her shirt. The fabric tore with a sharp rip, loud enough to make the diner go quiet. The girl's shirt split along the seam, exposing more skin than she intended. The sudden shock of humiliation hit her face like a physical blow. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood there, staring at him. Her eyes narrowed. The man laughed, turning back to his friends as if he'd won something. But he didn't notice the change in the air. He didn't notice the way the other people in the diner stared at him now, not with amusement, but with disgust. He didn't notice the way the girl's hands clenched at her sides. And he didn't notice the way the diner's silence was about to become dangerous. The girl's voice was low, controlled, and deadly calm. "You don't know who you're messing with," she said. The man scoffed. "Oh, I know exactly who I'm messing with." He turned away, smirking like he'd just pulled off the funniest joke in the world. But he was wrong, because he didn't know the truth. He didn't know that the girl at the counter wasn't just any girl. He didn't know that the sound of a motorcycle engine could mean more than just a vehicle. He didn't know that the quiet woman he'd just humiliated was the sister of a Hell's Angel. And he didn't know that her brother was already on his way. The girl walked out of the diner without looking back. The door closed behind her with a soft chime, but it felt like a final line being drawn. Inside, the diner remained quiet, the air heavy with the kind of silence that follows something ugly. The men in the booth were still laughing, but their laughter sounded strained now, like a song played too loud. The girl didn't hurry. She didn't run. She simply walked, as if she was in control of the night itself. The parking lot was empty except for a few cars and the flickering neon sign. The air was cold, and it cut through her torn shirt like a knife. She didn't feel the cold, though. She only felt the anger. She stopped at the edge of the lot, just far enough from the diner to be unseen but close enough to listen. She didn't move. She waited. And then, in the distance, she heard it. The sound of a motorcycle. It started as a low rumble, then grew louder, closer, like a storm rolling in. The girl's body stiffened. The motorcycle didn't roar into the parking lot. It stopped before it even reached the edge, as if the rider had expected her. The engine idled, steady and powerful, like a heartbeat. The girl didn't turn her head. The rider didn't move. For a moment, there was only the sound of the bike and the distant hum of the diner. Then a man stepped out of the shadows. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black leather. His hair was dark, cut short. His face was calm, almost gentle, but his eyes were sharp, cold, and unreadable. He walked toward her with slow, deliberate steps. He looked like a man who had seen violence and decided not to flinch at it. He stopped beside her and spoke quietly. "You okay?" The girl didn't answer right away. She kept staring at the diner, watching the men inside. Then she finally spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm fine." He didn't move. He didn't speak again. The silence between them was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence shared between people who didn't need words. Then the man turned his head slightly, his gaze fixed on the diner's windows. "Those guys," he said. "They won't stop." The girl's jaw tightened. "I know." The man stepped closer. The men in the booth noticed. Their laughter stopped. Their faces changed. The leader of the group stood up, his expression turning from smug to fearful. The man in leather walked toward them, his boots making soft thuds on the pavement. The men didn't move. They didn't run. They didn't know what to do. The girl followed behind him, silent. As they approached, the leader tried to regain control. "Who are you?" The man didn't answer. He just stopped in front of the leader, close enough that the leader could feel his presence like pressure. The leader smirked. "You lost or something?" The man's voice was low. "You think this is funny?" he asked. The leader laughed, trying to hide his fear. "It was just a joke. We didn't mean." The man's eyes flashed. "She's not just a girl," he said. The leader's smirk faltered. "What do you mean?" The man's voice grew colder. "She's my sister." The words hit the leader like a physical blow. The room went quiet. The waitress stopped wiping a table. The cook stopped flipping burgers. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. The leader tried to recover. "We didn't know." The man stepped closer, his voice soft, but deadly. "You should have known," he said. The girl didn't move. She stood beside him like a shadow. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp. She watched the men, not with fear, but with something far more dangerous, patience. The leader's friends stared at the man in leather, then at the girl. Their faces showed the realization that this wasn't just about a torn shirt anymore. The girl finally spoke again, her voice quiet but firm. "Don't touch me again." The man beside her nodded once, almost imperceptibly. And then, without another word, they turned and walked away. The men in the diner watched them go, trembling. Because now they knew. They had made a mistake. And the warning had already been given. The next morning, the diner looked normal. From the outside, it was just a small building with a flickering sign and a few empty parking spaces. Inside, the coffee still smelled bitter, the grill still hissed, and the regulars still sat in their usual booths like nothing had happened. But something had changed. The atmosphere was different. The silence was heavier. People avoided looking at the counter. The waitress moved slower, as if each step required more effort. The men from the night before didn't come in. No one mentioned them, but everyone knew. Everyone had seen the way the girl had walked out. Everyone had seen the way the man in leather had stepped in. Everyone had seen the warning. The girl sat on the hood of a car behind the diner, her jacket pulled tight around her. She stared at the ground, her torn shirt hidden beneath the fabric. She looked calm, but her eyes were distant, like she was watching something that hadn't happened yet. Her phone buzzed. She didn't move. It buzzed again. She finally pulled it out. A message flashed across the screen. "We saw. We'll handle it." She stared at it for a long moment. Then she typed nothing. She didn't need to. She already knew what would happen. The girl's brother didn't respond to things like a normal person. He didn't make promises. He made decisions. Across town, in a hidden garage behind a chain-link fence, the Hells Angels were gathering. The air inside smelled of gasoline, oil, and metal. The sound of engines echoed through the space, and the men spoke in low voices, like they were planning something that didn't need to be explained. The leader, her brother, stood at the center. He was not loud. He didn't have to be. The room quieted when he spoke. His face was calm, but his eyes were hard. He looked at the men around him. "Who did it?" he asked. One of the bikers stepped forward, holding up a phone. The screen displayed a photo taken from the diner. The men in the photo were laughing, pointing at the girl. The man who had torn her shirt was clearly visible, his face smug and proud. The leader stared at the photo for a moment, then slowly looked up. "Good," he said. The word was quiet, but it sounded like a verdict. The men around him shifted. They knew what it meant. They didn't ask. They didn't need to. The leader turned to his men and spoke with a calm authority that made the room feel like it had been sealed shut. "We're going to make them remember this night," he said. "Not just for the girl. For us. For respect." A few of the bikers nodded. They began to plan. Not with anger. Not with rage. With precision. They talked about where the men lived, where they worked, what kind of cars they drove. They discussed the best time to strike, the easiest way to get them alone. They spoke like professionals, like men who had done this before. The girl watched from a distance, her expression unreadable. She didn't want this, but she understood it. She understood that her brother wasn't doing this for revenge. He was doing this because the world had crossed a line. He was doing this because disrespect was a language the bikers understood. She sat quietly, listening to the sound of motorcycles in the distance, feeling the weight of what was coming. And she knew the men who had ripped her shirt were about to learn something they had never been taught. Some mistakes don't end with an apology. Some mistakes end with consequences. The warehouse was the kind of place that felt abandoned even when it was full. The air was thick with dust and old rust. The only light came from a few flickering bulbs hanging from the ceiling, casting long shadows that moved like living things. The men from the diner arrived one by one, each of them trying to act confident, trying to convince themselves that they weren't scared. But the truth was obvious. They knew they were in trouble. Their laughter from the night before was gone. Their jokes were gone. Even their swagger was gone. Now they looked like men who had been told the world was ending and they were powerless to stop it. They met in the center of the warehouse, huddled close, whispering. "Maybe it was just a misunderstanding," one of them said. "Maybe we should apologize," another said. But none of them wanted to admit the real truth. They were waiting for punishment. A distant rumble rolled through the building. At first, they thought it was thunder, or maybe a truck passing outside. But the sound grew louder and louder until it became unmistakable. Motorcycles. The men froze. Their eyes darted toward the open doors. The sound of engines echoed through the warehouse like a warning. They could feel the vibrations through the concrete floor. Then the doors opened. A line of motorcycles rolled in, one by one, like a black tide. The bikers wore leather jackets and serious faces. No one smiled. No one spoke. They didn't need to. At the front of the line was the brother. He didn't look angry. He looked like a man who had made a decision and was now carrying it out. The leader of the men from the diner tried to speak, but his voice cracked. What is this?" he stammered. The brother dismounted his bike slowly, as if he was savoring the moment. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. He moved with a calm that made the air around him feel colder. He walked toward them. The men backed away, but there was nowhere to go. The brother stopped in front of the leader, his eyes fixed on him. He looked at the man as if he was looking at a dangerous animal that needed to be controlled. "You think you can do whatever you want?" he asked. The leader swallowed hard. "We didn't mean." The brother cut him off. "Didn't mean," he repeated, his voice low. The leader tried to laugh, but it came out as a weak cough. "It was just a joke." The brother's eyes narrowed. "Not to her," he said. The girl stepped forward from the shadows, her torn shirt hidden beneath the jacket. She walked with slow, steady steps, her face calm and cold. She looked at the men with a level of calm that made their skin crawl. "This is what you get," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried like a gunshot. The men flinched. The brother nodded once, like a signal. The bikers moved in, not to kill, not to torture, but to teach them a lesson they would never forget. They grabbed the men, pushing them into a line. The men struggled, but their resistance was weak. They had already surrendered mentally. They knew what was coming. The brother spoke again, his voice calm and clear. "You don't disrespect my family," he said. He stepped closer to the leader. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small object, something that looked like a wallet. He opened it. Inside was a photo, the same photo from the diner. The leader's face went pale. The brother held the photo up, letting the men see it. "You remember this?" he asked. The leader shook his head, but his voice was barely a whisper. "Yes." The brother's expression didn't change. "Good," he said. Then the brother did something unexpected. He didn't hit them. He didn't even raise his hand. Instead, he tore the photo in half. The men stared in shock. The brother looked at the girl. "You okay?" he asked, softly. She nodded. The brother turned back to the men. "This is your warning," he said. He stepped back. The bikers released them. The men stumbled, confused, terrified, and shaking. They didn't know whether to run or stay. The brother's voice echoed through the warehouse. "If you ever see her again," he said, "you will wish you hadn't." The men didn't need to be told twice. They fled. The motorcycles roared out of the warehouse, leaving a silence behind that felt like a grave. The girl stood there, breathing slowly, her heart pounding. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply looked at her brother. He approached her and placed a hand on her shoulder, gentle but firm. "You did good," he said. She nodded. And in that moment, she understood something clearly. The world didn't need to fear her. It needed to fear what she belonged to.